What's up, y'all? It's your girl Stephanie, and today we have our very first episode of Sex Smarts. This is a series that I've been wanting to do for a long time now. I'm really happy that I'm finally getting into it. So in this series, we're gonna talk about all things sex, from birth control to consent to masturbation. I feel like we could talk about anything here. It's really an open space for us to discuss. So in this very first episode, I am going in a more personal route. This is a video that I have talked about filming for a while, which is my own IUD experience. So before we get into it, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe below. Come join the sisterhood. No matter your true pronoun or gender identity, come join the family. All right, let's get started. I'm sure most of y'all know this, but if you didn't know, maybe I should have prefaced this at the very beginning of the video. The IUD is a form of birth control. So IUD stands for intrauterine device. This is a birth control method that sits inside of your uterus. So the hormonal IUD, like the Mirena, which is what I have, is a small, flexible piece of plastic shaped like a T, and it releases small amounts of the hormone progestin into your body over several years. So I've had the Mirena now for 7.5, almost 8 years. So I'm on my second go because for the Mirena, you need to change it out every 5 years. And by the way, in this video, before just talking about my personal experience with this thing, I wanted to go over, like how it works and stuff. So I got some notes here. I might be looking down a little bit, and I will make sure to link out all of the links in the research that I use, because I have some articles in here. I got scientific studies, so if you want to really read and go in depth into this information, I'll make sure to link it down below. So how does this darn thing work? Well, there's actually two different kinds of IUDs. So we have the hormonal and non-hormonal. I have the hormonal IUD. It's called the Mirena. I believe there is another one actually that came out. But I think the Mirena is the most commonly used one. There's also a copper IUD, which is the non-hormonal. I don't know as much information about that one, but from what I know, sperm really does not like copper. And when it gets into the vicinity of the copper IUD, the sperm heads get decapitated. Yeah. In terms of the hormonal IUD, what it does is it prevents fertilization by causing a very profound change in the viscosity of the mucus within your cervix so that the sperm can't stick to it. It changes the amount and viscosity of cervical mucus. All those words just so lovely together. One of my favorite things about the IUD is that I haven't had a period for almost 8 years at this point. This is all down to the hormone that is released from the IUD, which is progestin. This is a synthetic form of a hormone that's naturally occurring in your body, which is progesterone. This is a regulatory chemical, so it determines your body's ovulation and menstruation. The lining of your uterus is what's shed during your period. So if the lining is very thin, it's indicating to your body that you don't have anything to shed. I think there is a misconception about the IUD because you stop getting your period. People are thinking, oh, is it gonna affect your fertility in the future? So I found this study here. There was a paper that focused on 576 women who had their IUDs removed for planned pregnancy. The data from this study add further evidence that fertility subsequent to IUD removal is not impaired. Among women followed up with, 94.3% conceived. The majority of these conceptions occurred within the first 3 months after IUD removal. Age at removal was the only variable which seemed to influence conception rates. Obviously, if you are on birth control now, does not mean you don't want to have babies in the future. So it's really good to know that a birth control option like this doesn't impair that. Just, a little summary of what happens. A doctor or a nurse will put a speculum into your vagina, and there is a special device that the IUD is used for insertion. This device helps to insert the IUD through the opening of your cervix and into your uterus. So it just sits there, fits real nice. The doctor or nurse will take out the inserter. There's gonna be a little string that they're gonna trim up. So that's how you can tell if everything's okay in there. There's a little string that hangs down. and you don't ever feel it inside of you. If you're having sex, you don't feel it either. The other person, I think, sometimes they might be able to feel it. And then you have a follow-up appointment to make sure everything's, set in place. We'll talk about something that can go wrong in a little bit. Very rare, but it can go wrong. So we'll get into that later. All right, so let's just dive into my own personal experience with the Mirena. I have had it now, like I said, for almost 8 years. Before that, I had taken oral contraception, and I had also used the NuvaRing. Just with my lifestyle, my schedule, oral contraception was terrible because I can't keep a schedule with that. I'm also very forgetful when it comes to pills, and it was just not good. And the NuvaRing, you keep it in for 3 weeks, take it out for a week, and then put another one in for 3 weeks. I was actually very good about keeping on top of that, but I was annoyed with having to go to my doctor or go to Planned Parenthood actually every 3 months to get a new pack because you could only get 3 months at a time. And also, I just wanted to save money because birth control adds up, pads and tampons add up. So there was a lot of really great things pointing to me getting the IUD. I had a couple appointments with doctors before getting it done. I wasn't sure, I was on the fence, and I wanted to get more information about how it was inserted and the pain, because I heard about the pain before. One of the doctors said that they would prescribe a very low dosage painkiller, which I thought, okay, that's actually what I would want. But then I ended up not getting the IUD for a while. Then I went again, and the second doctor just said, oh, you just need to take ibuprofen before. So I was like, then the pain must not be too bad. And also, I feel like I have a pretty high pain threshold. What happened was I forgot to take the ibuprofen until maybe 10 minutes before the whole thing went down. And that was a mistake for sure. Before you get your IUD inserted, you have to get your uterine depth measured, which is actually something I haven't heard too many people talk about. And I'm wondering if that's how people come across issues, because your uterine depth has to be a certain amount. So here it says an adequate uterine depth is between 6 and 9 centimeters. So they have a device to measure that because the IUD has to fit in there. And if it's too short, oh my God, I don't know, it would pinch it. My uterine depth was just 6 centimeters. It was at the very, very minimum of the cutoff. So I was very happy about that. So yeah, first they do that, which is obviously very uncomfortable. You're just laying there, they got you lubed up. After they finish measuring your uterine depth and everything's good, here comes the insertion. You could definitely feel it happening. The insertion device, they have to push it up to a click. And it's just this for me, the way I describe it is it's low, bearing down pain. It's just a super uncomfortable, the pain is just a split second, but just feeling uncomfortable and that low down bearing feeling is definitely the most uncomfortable situation that I've ever put myself through voluntarily. Twice. This whole process is so fast. The nurses or doctors who are doing this for you, they know it's painful. They're just trying to get in, get out as quickly as possible. So the actual process of insertion, measuring insertion, is only a couple minutes or less even, to be honest. Maybe more, because my second time around I had to get it, taken out, put back in. But yeah, very short amount of time that it takes to do this, and good to go for 5 years. I would say if you're doing this, have somebody drive you there, because my very first time I drove myself, and going back to my car, it wasn't that I was in a lot of pain. Again, it was just a super uncomfortable feeling. It's just extreme cramps afterwards. That was my experience. I just had these extreme cramp feeling, and I got into my car and I had teared up a bit, and I was just sitting in my car oh my God, I have to drive home now. And that Kaiser, at the time I was living at my parents' house, that Kaiser was only, I want to say 15, 20 minutes from my parents' house, but it was just not a great drive. I mean, it's not it impaired my driving, but I was just I honestly should have just had my mom drive me. I don't know why I didn't tell her. I don't know, at the time I was just like, oh, like, I don't really want to talk about this. But when I got home, I definitely told her because I was in a lot of like crampy pain, and I just remember she brought me tea and I got in bed and it was really nice. So I should have just had my mom help me out there in that scenario. Like I said, I had those crampiness. It lasted for like the whole day pretty much, that kind of crampy feeling, and I was reading up on forums like, oh my god, what is this? And people were saying that those cramps were equivalent to having contractions. Like women who had had contractions were like, these cramps feel like I'm having contractions, and I was like, oh my god. I would say that uncomfortable feeling lasted for the whole day. Then the next day, I was perfectly fine. I think the next time when my period was supposed to happen, or at least I think like a month later, I did have that crampy feeling again, which I would say typically my periods are very light and I don't cramp that bad. So that was definitely an experience for me. But then after that, it was fine. I stopped getting my period and it's been smooth sailing from there. In terms of my second time around getting it, I was not looking forward to that because the thought of having to take one out and then put another one back in just seemed really hard. But honestly, I would say that it is worth it. It was only a couple, a minute longer of uncomfortableness when they had to take it out. In my mind, I was like, how are they gonna take out this tea thing out of there? It came out perfectly fine, really fast. It just like, they had to put a thing up there to take it out, and then they're putting another thing in there to insert another IUD. So just that whole process is uncomfortable. But that time around, I remember I definitely took my ibuprofen before, and then my friend picked me up after the appointment. That appointment, I audibly said the F word while it was happening. I'm very much in control of myself when it comes to swearing, and it just came out of my mouth, and I was like, it wasn't a scream, okay? It was like a kind of under the breath, but kind of loud F word. And then immediately after that, I was like, oh my god, I'm sorry. And the nurse was super understanding. She was like, it's okay. I think because my body had already been used to Mirena, I didn't have like that crazy cramping. I did have a bit of it for the rest of the day, but it wasn't as bad as the first time around. My body has been super happy with the Mirena. I will say though, like I said, my periods have been pretty light. I've never really was one to get heavy periods or heavy cramping. I would get cramping a bit, but not as much as other people I know. And I know that, not everybody stops their periods too on Mirena, but if you tend to have heavy periods, I think it could lighten them up. But for some people, it doesn't make periods go away altogether. I feel like I've already gone into some of this, but I wanted to go over some pros and cons of getting the IUD. One of the pros is that this form of birth control is highly effective. That is something that I read across the board on all these studies. It has a very low failure rate. It's over 99% effective. So less than 1 in 100 women will get pregnant. Around 9 in every 100 people who are taking the pill become pregnant because of the ability to just take it infrequently or miss days. Like, it's really difficult to be super regular with something like a pill. Speaking from experience here. I already knew, by the way, that was a horrible idea. I think I started using the pill, I believe I was 16. That could be a whole other video talking about when I started taking birth control. It was me going to Planned Parenthood by myself. That's a whole other thing. I knew that I would be really bad at it. I think I just did it for like a couple months, and then I switched to the NuvaRing, which was much, much easier, obviously, to handle. You wanted me to talk about just why I started taking birth control? I mean, I think we all know why. My decisions and how I went about it, I will definitely talk about that. Those are, some experiences that I had when I was younger, and it was kind of scary going through all of it alone. So I could definitely talk about that. But yeah, in terms of more pros, it's super convenient. We went over this already. You get it put in. You just gotta mark on your calendar 4 years and 11 months later to get another one. You get no periods At least a lot of people don't get any periods. You know, I've talked with many women now at this point about birth control and about the IUD. I've met so many people who have the IUD and are super, super happy with it. And from those women, I would say a majority of them stop getting their period, or they're just periodically every once in a while get spotting. So that's amazing. And because of that, you save so much money. I haven't paid for pads or tampons in almost 8 years. How much money is that? I need to figure out some math here, but I've saved a lot of money. You know, the cost of the actual Mirena will vary. I have Kaiser, so mine was covered by Kaiser. I don't know what my copay was. I don't really remember. Maybe $20 to get inserted. So that compared to years of pads and tampons, you just save so much money. And also, you know what? This just popped into my head, but like, is it better for the environment because of that? Because we're not using pads and tampons? I wonder comparatively to like, you know, the production of the IUD in terms of, I don't know, like the factories and all of plastics and everything that needs to be made for that compared to 5 years of pads and tampons and all that whole shebang. I wonder what is the environmental footprint of both of those things. Okay, so let's go over some of the cons. Obviously, this is the most invasive form of birth control. Some other side effects of the IUD that I found is nausea, ovarian cysts, and mood changes. I believe all these things can happen with other forms of birth control as well. So it is not like unique to the IUD. So I mentioned this before, but this is possibly the worst thing that can happen with the IUD. And this is the risk of accidental perforation or a hole in the uterus and expulsion of the IUD. So there's a small chance that the IUD can slip out of your uterus. According to Planned Parenthood, this is very rare. I don't believe I've ever heard of it happening to anybody that I know personally. But this is usually due to improper insertion, and that is why you need to do your follow-up appointment, because they need to do like a little string check. So that's why they leave a string in there, make sure it's dangling and everything is a-okay. I think the biggest con about the copper IUD is the heavier periods. Some people cannot do any hormonal form of birth control. I mean, not getting my period was one of the really huge determining factors of wanting to get the IUD, but obviously the first and foremost thing is birth control. And if that's something that you need to attain without having any hormones involved, then the copper IUD is a good choice, but you're gonna get heavier periods. All right, y'all, I think that's it for all the information that I have for you on the IUD and my IUD experience. It's painful. It's painful, but to me, so worth it. I really hope I covered everything here. You know, I wanted to be as in-depth as possible about the IUD. Again, like I said, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an expert in this. I'm doing research and trying to make sure that the articles that I talked about in this video are valid and actual real scientific studies. Yeah, with all that said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any suggestions for future Sex Smarts videos, please comment down below, or just anything that you would like to say about this video in general. We can have an open discussion about this, about your experience below. If you had a great experience, please comment that as well. I feel like what I'm about to get is a bunch of horrible experiences. It's like Yelp sometimes, you know, when you try and look up a spot. People like to complain more than praise a place a lot of times. So let's get a mix of both good experiences, good stories down there, as well as, you know, I'm kind of scared to hear the horror stories. I also really want to make it clear in this video, I'm not telling you you need to go get the IUD at all. I'm just trying to relay some information and speak about my personal experience. I want you to do whatever is good for you and whatever makes you happy. Just really wanted to clarify that. But yeah, with all that said, again, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, you watched this far, please subscribe. Come join the sisterhood. We got a lot more really awesome videos coming up for ya. I love y'all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.